Welcome. Hello, everybody. Good to see you all today. Really looking forward to taking you through this and inviting you to listen to Freddie today. It's going to be such a great session. So thanks for joining us. Really, like I say, looking forward to it. We're just waiting for everyone to sort of join the room, and hopefully we'll all be here soon. I think that's most people are in here. So let's jump straight into it. I'm just going to have to deny all of these AI requests that come up. But there we go. Cool. Awesome. Well, look, thanks for joining us. A few things about Robot Mascot before we kick off, and then we'll hand over to Freddie for the main event. Quick introduction to myself for those of you that don't know who I am. I'm James Church. I'm one of the co-founders here at Robot Mascot. I'm just going to put all your microphones on mute. That includes Freddie and Nick, because we've got some other people joining the room with a bit of background noise. So yeah, I'm James Church. I'm the author of a best-selling book called Investable Entrepreneur. I'm also one of the co-founders at Robot Mascot. And I'll invite my business partner up to the stage in a minute as well. Robot Mascot's an investment readiness agency. For those that don't know, we basically help founders convince investors to back their business with sort of pre-seed, seed, and Series A funding. We've supported more than 3,000 founders to date. We've worked with founders from all over the world to raise capital: the UK, Europe, Middle East, Asia, Africa, Australia, literally all over the world. And when they apply our unique approach, which I document in my book, they become 40 times more likely to secure funding. They've raised more than 220 million to date. We've won global awards for our approach to raising investment as well. And the reason we do all of this, and the reason we put on sessions like today, is because we want to see great ideas and innovations flourish. We want to help them get the capital they need to get their ideas off the ground. We want to bring people like Freddie along to give you other skill sets you need to make those great ideas flourish. That's really what gets us going at Robot Mascot, and that's what all the team love to see, is these incredible successes that our clients have as a result of being part of our community, whether that be working with us directly as a client, whether it be attending events like this, or reading the book. Those good news stories as successes and of these ideas and innovations getting off the ground and achieving success is really what we like to see. So for those of you that are thinking of raising investment, I'm going to be sharing a link in the chat very shortly to book a session, if you haven't already been on one, with me for 90 minutes to talk through a fundraising strategy and talk you through in more detail our approach that delivers those sorts of results. That's a group-based session. It'll be a great to see you there. So I'll share you a link in a few minutes so you can book onto that if you want to. But without further ado, that's enough from me. I'm going to hand over to Nick now, who's going to unmute himself, and then he's going to talk to you about who we've got coming up today with Freddie from the Healthy Entrepreneur Club. So Nick, over to you.
Thank you for that, James. Yeah, just a few words from me. I just really wanted to say that we're really fortunate at Robot Mascot because we get to work with really good people. We get to work with like inspiring founders that are taking these leaps into the unknown. But the thing is, taking those leaps can be pretty daunting, and it can be lonely too. So that's why we like to bring you these events and these sessions, so we can look at supporting you on your journey and give you access to great people like Freddie. So I was really pleased when Freddie sort of agreed to do this. He's got a lot of experience to share with you. And storytelling is at the heart of what Freddie's going to talk about. And it's really at the heart of what any brand or business should be doing. So I hope you get a lot out of today's session. Feel free to ask lots of questions at the end. And now I'd like to introduce you to the guy, Freddie Pullen, founder of the Healthy Entrepreneur Club.
Thank you so much, Nick. It's absolutely great to be here. I'm looking forward to this one. It'll be really fun. Let me just share my screen. 1 second. Okay. Can you see that? I was getting a nod on the right-hand side. I can see you, Nick. Okay, cool. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, like Nick said, my name is Freddie Pullen, and today I want to talk to you about becoming recognized. So it's not about being a celebrity. It's not about becoming an influencer. We just want to become recognized for the value that we have intrinsically. And we're going to talk about the power of storytelling, some of the pitfalls that we often see, and some of the tactics, mainly the LinkedIn and the podcasting tactics that we can go through and that are working now and will work into 2025. So why do you care? I really wanted to talk straight away about Dragon's Den here because I think it's really relevant to you guys, right? So you're either a founder or an investor and you're looking at adding more value to your business. And there's three things I want to share with you. So our podcast is a top 1% podcast in the world. It's been going a couple of years and we're really lucky with some of the people we get to talk to. Most recently, we spoke to a guy called John Aguilar, who is the founder and the host of Dragon's Den in Asia. So it's the biggest and longest running business show in Asia. And he said something that was really interesting. He said that the investors that he has on his show are not the best in the world. They're not the best in Asia, but because of their personal brand and because of the recognition they have from the show, they are able to get the best deals on the table first. They get the cream of the crop. And something that he really wanted to make really clear on our podcast together was that people don't have to be duped by your personal brand. They don't have to be led astray. It's very much about authenticity and trust. The second thing I wanted to mention was one of our clients is currently going through the process of becoming or going on Dragon's Den next year, UK. And behind the scenes, the one metric that they will not stop talking about is his impressions per week or his followers. They want him to come to the show with enough personal brand to help launch or grow his startup into the social media space from day one if he were to get some investment. And then the third one we have to mention is the Stephen Bartlett effect. So millions and millions of pounds raised on Dragon's Den since its inception. Some people on there that are incredible, you know, Peter Jones and Deborah Meaden, to name just two, who have made the most in terms of investing and in terms of return. But we're seeing more and more people coming onto the show, aiming all of their research and all of their time at Stephen Bartlett. He hasn't got the most money. He hasn't got the best track record in investing, but he's the one they want to go for because they feel like they know him the best and his current set of skills are the ones that will take their startups the furthest. Why else would you care? Well, we know that by building a personal brand and using storytelling, it will reduce your cost to acquire customers by building that trust, that know, like, and trust. Also decreases life cycle. So it can decrease your life cycle by up to 50%. So if someone takes 6 months from the first time they see your business to buying, this could be down to 3 months, which again reduces the cost. In our business, we refer to the check back as when some cold traffic first sees your business. What they're going to do, especially as the generation's going younger and younger, is they're going to try and find you, primarily using social media. Secondly to that, they're going to use something like ChatGPT, some sort of AI tool to find you. That's the check back. They're looking to see if they can validate you and trust you. Really important to have some sort of profile online that they can then validate that you are who you say you are and you've got an opinion that's worth sharing. Some of our clients literally work with us because they want to attract top talent and nothing more. They really just want to, sorry, I'm just going to do this little button here. They want to attract the top talent, and by doing so, they're able to have more impact in their business. You can attract top talent by having some sort of thought leadership, by being known for the vision and the mission that you're on. And I think this is one of the areas that people are really still sleeping on. This is something that is incredibly important in this really competitive age of trying to get the best talent in our businesses. If you've got a personal brand, you'll find it easier to attract them. The dopamine saga, I'll quickly go over this one because the dopamine saga, you know, dopamine in general in terms of social media is something that's talked about so much. But by building a personal brand that goes through authenticity and familiarization, you don't need to play this dopamine game. We're not talking about dancing on TikTok. We're not talking about using 3-second cuts like Mr. Beast to try and get people to like and know what you're doing. We're talking about creating genuine know, like, and trust with your customers. And then media. So I wanted to put this one in here because for our podcast, when our team are contacted by someone who wants to be a guest, the first thing we do is look at their personal brand. We have to validate that we know that they have got credibility in what they're talking about. And this works in the same way when you look at all media. You're talking about going on TV, going on radio, whatever it might be. I have to put this in here as well. I'm going to see Ray Dalio speak in Abu Dhabi next week. And this is something that I think really underpins what storytelling and personal branding is. Honesty and transparency are the foundations of trust, right? So trust is what we're trying to build here. It's so important that we understand that trust is the first thing that we want to do. So what's coming up? Well, I want to talk about, firstly, we'll explain who I am. Then we'll cover some positioning tactics, why positioning is so important, before looking at what storytelling or story selling is. We'll then dive into tactics such as pattern interrupts and unique mechanisms. After that, I'll highlight common pitfalls. I'll talk you through some LinkedIn tactics, podcasting tactics, and some flywheels, and hopefully there'll be some time at the end for a Q&A. So firstly, who am I? Why am I relevant to any of this? I grew up in and around Bath in the southwest of the UK. Both my parents are police officers, always have been. They did 35 years in the police force. I did an undergrad in business management and a master's degree in economics from the University of Winchester. I very much followed the path of, go to uni, get a job, get a house. That's what my parents had done. That's what they told me to do. In and amongst that, I worked almost full-time alongside my degrees to afford to travel. I knew that there was something more out there for me, so I decided I would travel in and amongst university. So I would work to afford uni. If there was anything left over, I would take an interrail around Europe and live on £5 a day. Traveling was something I really wanted to do. I was really interested in understanding the stories of other people. When I graduated, I became a business analyst, and then I jumped ship to become a product manager at the world's largest digital publisher. So this is where my love for sort of story and also the way that big companies operate really started. So this was right at the beginning of COVID. So this company does 500 million monthly unique sessions on their brands. It was in a very aggressive merger and acquisition plan at the time, and it still is. And what we really looked for every time was how can we bring a new company on board and merge their compelling story to ours. And I even got this job because of storytelling. The covering letter was, please explain why this is your absolute dream job. And I couldn't do that because no one's dream job is to become a product manager. I don't care who you are, that's not true. I wanted to be an astronaut. And so I spoke about why becoming an astronaut was my dream job and why this wasn't my dream job. But I was able to use storytelling and story arcs to bring that round to show the similarities, even though they're few and far between being an astronaut and a product manager at this fast-growing e-com and publishing company. Alongside that, me and my fiance renovated a few properties until 2022. I think it's a pretty bad picture. There it is. Bad picture of me back then. So yeah, we renovated properties until 2022. When this happened, so I was driving, actually my fiance was driving from our house just outside Bath across to another village about 4 miles away. And we were hit head on by a BMW driver. I shouldn't have named the brand, but I have done. Who was on his phone. He was on his phone at the time. He came around the corner, head on, wrong side of the road, upside down in a ditch, fire, smoke, airbags, blood. Not very nice. But what happened was, in that time, we had a bit of time off work, 2 weeks to get over the injuries that we had, and we decided that we needed to do something with our lives. We decided to sell the properties, to quit our jobs, and 2 months later, we landed in Dubai with nothing. No audience, no real entrepreneurial experience, no track record, no recognition for my skills at all. Just the knowledge of how to become recognized from the strategies we'd implemented to get 500 million monthly unique sessions at my last job. I knew that there was a way that I could help people and myself become known for the skills that I definitely had. So within 6 months, we gained thousands of followers on LinkedIn, launched a podcast, which went to the #1 spot or the top spot in 9 countries. I've been interviewed on national television, guested on 10+ podcasts, had a monthly column in national publication, was featured in international press, and we'd filled our pipeline full of clients, which enabled us to scale pretty quickly. And we also got international recognition from a few publications. But we didn't do this with spending money on marketing or PR, doing dances on TikTok, or doing many in-person networking events at all. It was mainly by positioning ourselves and telling stories. This is us on the way to the airport, and this is us 6 months later. So I want to start with positioning. I really want to get into the nitty-gritty of why. Now that you know a little bit about me. Positioning is more important than you think. Most people that come to us, in fact, all of them are brilliant at what they do. A lot of them already have audiences, but if they were to put an offer in front of that audience, they wouldn't buy. And more than that, they wouldn't even know why you're trying to sell that thing. They don't understand why you have even tried to sell them that thing. They weren't expecting it from you. They weren't positioned correctly. So why would we start here? Well, we start here because of that exact fact. We need to be directionally correct. Being correct is key. We can be 1 or 2% off. That's absolutely fine. But we need to be roughly on the right track. And by positioning, I mean spotting the link between what you sell and what you're known for. So the examples that we've got here, I think, are people like Ali Abdaal. So he was known for productivity. In fact, he was actually known for helping people revise to become doctors or to pass their medical exams. Productivity was his ocean. You know, you start with puddle, lake, and ocean as you're growing up in terms of your knowledge base. But very quickly, he started to be able to monetize and utilize his YouTube channel. And now he makes $5 million plus a year from YouTube. He sells his YouTube Academy, but he's known for productivity. His YouTube Academy is a part-time academy to help you leave your job or to grow your business in your spare time. It's a great example of being positioned correctly. One of our clients sells desks, very, very clever, work from home desks that fold up on the wall. They look like art. They fold down. It's the perfect productivity station. He doesn't want to talk about desks. He's not going to become known or recognized for desks. He's known for helping and working towards the work from home revolution. That's what he wants to be known for. That's his thing. That's his positioning. And everyone that we work with know they're really looking at how they can actually build an audience of people who will be motivated to do something or buy something or work towards something that you can help with, you can solve. So here's my challenge for you. How does your origin story, and we'll go more deeply into this, link to what you do now? So for example, and we will go into this in a bit more detail, I've told you a bit of a story about me. If I was talking about this and I hadn't had the background that I did, it would make no sense as to why I'm talking to you. So there has to be a level of credibility here. And so if I put you on stage in front of 3,000 people, knowing what you know now, in this brief, probably 5-10 minutes in, this brief presentation, what would you talk about? Because it shouldn't be exactly what you do. If you're a financial advisor, for example, and you get on a stage and start talking about financial advice, no one's interested. We want to talk and understand a bit more about you. We want to hear your stories. The reason I say 3,000 people is because that's what it takes to create a top 5% podcast. 3,000 people must download the podcast in the first 7 days of that podcast going live. And people are doing this week in, week out. So whether you're on a stage or you're on a top podcast, that's the number of people who are listening to you. And we want them to recognize you for the value that you've got. And we do that by making sure you're positioned correctly. I say we, you can do this yourself. So let's go to storytelling or story selling. We've got 3 here. These are the 3 very basic core stories that you need to have. And you will have heard these before. So the origin story we need to look at is, where did you come from? So you can have more than one of these. I've told you one of mine, which started 3 years ago. It's a very recent origin story for me. Ideally, it goes back as far as possible to when it's relevant to you. But I don't feel like I need to utilize my more deep origin story here today. The one that I just told you is hyper relevant to this conversation. So you can tweak things to the situation you're in. And don't fixate too much on this origin story. A lot of people are not confident enough with where they've come from. They think it's not interesting, it's not powerful. I haven't had a super hard upbringing. Doesn't matter. We all have watched reality TV shows where you're sat there wondering why you're watching these people sit around by a campfire. And you're watching it because you want to understand the stories. If you actually explained it to an alien what you were watching, they would think it was bizarre. The second one is the current story. So what are you doing now? What mission are you currently on? So I can tell you that I'm growing my business. I live in Dubai. I'm trying to get my podcast from where it is to 50,000 downloads a week. That is my current mission. You're either on board or you're not. And then there's an offer story. So what can you solve for me? And this is where you want to make sure that your authority leans towards the right thing. So an offer story is something you can use in different social platforms. We'll talk about that a bit later. But the idea is that you can show your value and bring someone towards how you can help them. This is the one that you'll see the least of. You'll hear a lot about origin stories. Every time you've ever heard someone on a podcast or on a stage, maybe on TV, they're told a bit about their origin story. They may even say what they're up to. They might put something in front of you that you can buy. But be aware, storytelling is the method. Story selling is the tactic. And we'll get into that when we go on to LinkedIn and podcasting a bit later. Storytelling is what we can use everywhere. So the challenge is, what is your compelling story? What is that story that if I said to you, how did you start this? Or where have you come from? Or what happened to you in your childhood that made you who you are today? That's the compelling story. And you'll hear this in loads and loads of startup stories. A really, really good example from the UK, Perfect Ted, Dragon's Den, successful startup. That is the UK's largest or fastest growing matcha energy drink. And the compelling story is that it was created to solve an issue for the founder. So one of the 3 founders was not able to digest or consume normal energy drinks, caffeine-based energy drinks. They found matcha and they wanted to revolutionize energy on the high street. A compelling story about her solving her own issue. So where else could storytelling be used? Well, you've seen this everywhere. I probably don't need to tell you, but I'll run through a few. Ads, copy, books, SEO, socials, email, newsletters, flyers, video, podcasts, everywhere. Everyone is telling stories. It is the oldest and longest running form of marketing. Next thing I want to talk to you about is pattern interrupts. This slide is blue and the fonts are different for a reason, because you become used to, in the first 10 minutes of this presentation, white presentations, normal font, reading left to right. A pattern interrupt is something that we want you to use all the time. So in a lot of your copy, in all of your socials, in anything you're doing, it's important to interrupt what the human body or the human mind thinks is going to happen next. So if I go back again, if I could see all of you, which I can't, when that first came up, you would have changed state. We want you to change your state. You'll have seen this all the time on social media. People are doing things like using hooks. They're using different areas and different things, different sounds to try and get you to do something. But we can use this all the time. We can stop you from scrolling on LinkedIn or down a slide deck or through an investment pitch deck by using pattern interrupts. This is really, really key, because the human body always wants you, human mind, I should say, human body, always wants you to, or wants to know what's going to happen next. You can interrupt that and you'll get far, far more interaction with anything that you're doing if you can preempt what the person is expecting to see. Secondly to that is unique mechanisms. The picture in the bottom right is a podcast that we released today that I really want to mention to you. So this is a guy called William Brown, who does about $10 million a year in his coaching business. He sold his previous business to private equity for a lot more than that. And he talked about unique mechanisms as the way that he got his business to that place. He talks about the idea that if you can use a unique mechanism, you can describe something that you do, whether it's your story from your history or past, or inside your business, you will find yourself with a lot more interest and become a lot more recognized for what you're doing. So we're always looking for intrigue in stories. For the same reason, businesses who discover new methods tend to get a lot more attention to start with. If someone comes along and says, I've got this new way, you can't help but feel intrigue. The only reason we stop on TV shows, on websites, on social media is because we feel intrigue. We feel an itch that we need to scratch. There is an example I want to give you here. I'll give you his example. So he gave the example of, if I said to you, I can get you 5 to 10 new leads every week on LinkedIn, or I say, my team and I, we found a new system on LinkedIn. Only a few people know because we've had to go to LinkedIn to make sure it's okay. And it combines LinkedIn with another system that we've created. And we can almost guarantee you 5 to 10 new leads or new inquiries per month. Which one are you going to go with? You always ask a question about the second one, because something in your mind goes, I need to know what that system is. And it's something that with pattern interrupts creates another level to becoming recognized. So position your business in a way that creates intrigue by introducing a unique mechanism. And in that podcast, I did challenge him and say, we need to make sure there's a line between making something new and actually being able to create results, give results. We're not talking about trying to deceive. We're talking about actually talking about what we're doing in a way that allows us to become recognized for the value that we have. So before we get into the tactics, I want to cover some of the pitfalls. There's a lot of pitfalls. So the poor positioning rule, I kind of touched on this, but the pilot's rule is that if you're 1 degree off when you first take off from a runway, you will arrive at your destination, or you'll be miles away, sorry, you'll be hundreds of miles away from your destination. It's exactly the same with positioning. People start off on their own and it's fantastic. They start to deviate because they're going towards what content is working for them. Or if they're not talking about content and they're talking about just their business in general, they can find themselves a long way from where they intended to be based on the positioning not being strong. And what you do is you position yourself and then you create those pillars, 3 to 5 pillars, which allow you to create content, create anything for your business, any assets for your business that stay on the rules or the pillars which keep you true to where you want to go. Secondly, lack of testing. So we know that testing is incredibly important. In terms of storytelling and becoming recognized, this stuff, storytelling in general, does work and has worked forever. The way that we get stories out changes. So we need to test more than we think. This is not a fire and forget exercise. We all know you can't write copy for an ad or for a post or for your website, leave it and expect it to keep working. We need to evolve. We need to test. So we need to test as frequently as we can. Massive pitfall we saw 2023, last year, but it was a long time ago, is the use of AI. So AI is fantastic as an assistant, but if you use AI to try and storytell, everyone can tell now. You know, our entire team, we do tests every week to try and find people that are using AI. And we can do it straight away. It's almost laughable when people use AI for their content because you can tell straight away it uses the same 50 or so words. And what happens is people don't become familiar with you. You're not using your actual way of writing. We want to see spelling mistakes. If any of you have been through any of Alex Hormozi's or Russell Brunson's funnels, you will see specific ways that they speak in their writing or in their video. And in their writing, you'll see spelling mistakes because they're very open that they have made mistakes. You can't be perfect. You shouldn't be perfect. And we'll get to that. Oversharing. So oversharing is a massive one. And it's the opposite of one of the next points, which is going to be confidence. People want to tell a story about something that they've done. And there's a very fine line between oversharing and getting it just right. So we don't want to hear about all the woes that you've had in your life. We don't want to hear about all the hardship. I could have told you about my accident in a lot more depth. I could have gone, oh, goodness me, but they couldn't believe that we survived it. The fire engine came from here and it was horrendous. What's the point? I've made my point that it was an epiphany in my life and I moved on. If you overshare, what happens is people do come close to you, but again, for the wrong reasons. The positioning will not be strong. They're just feeling sorry for you, or they want to become you if you're going the other way and you're becoming a bit of a narcissist and you're showing off a little bit too much. Oversharing is one to be really careful of. Lack of consistency, we all know what this is going to mean. This is just, you do it for a week and you stop, or you don't test enough and you stop. Really, really key here. Needs to be in the list. Overvalue of skills as well. So people especially on LinkedIn, maybe on podcasts and in interviews, everyone wants to be an expert. An expert is a word that you can't get. You can't become an expert. You can become someone who is incredibly experienced, has a lot of credibility, but an expert is something that we can't earn. And therefore, people think that their skills are worth more than they are on social media or in interviews. The audience is the hero, not you. You're just there to help, to facilitate, to give value. Your skills are only valuable to those who believe they're valuable. Audience is the hero in all of this storytelling and recognition piece. And then perfectionism. So Stephen Bartlett, we've been in contact with her recently, has a head of failure. Her job is to fail every single day. If she's not failing, she's in trouble, right? So if she's doing things that are right, she gets in trouble. She needs to do something that makes it break. She wants to break something, whether it's content, whether it's a new system. As soon as it works, she passes it to the team and goes, there you go, you take it. So we want to make sure that we're putting stuff out there. We have got to become recognized by showing ourselves. That does not need to be perfect every time. You don't need to make sure that your branding's absolutely spot on, or that everything's spelt amazingly, or that your picture looks incredible, it's all edited up. We want to know you, the raw person. And then lack of confidence. So the opposite of oversharing effectively. So everyone wants to hear from you. If you've got a business, or maybe you're an investor, maybe you're looking for investment, whatever it might be, we want to hear about you. We don't want to hear just about the business. We want to hear about you as well. And so the lack of confidence to share that only hurts you. We had a guy on the podcast today who in, I think, 2018, started putting content out into the world. He's a financial advisor. That's why it's on my mind. And he literally just started putting videos out there explaining how having his kids has really changed his mindset with money. And he wants more people to understand how building some sort of pot of money when you have a family is incredibly important. He said that he was bullied massively by his friends, by his colleagues when he started making content or started storytelling, started telling his story on his website, his blog, his investment decks, whatever it might be. And that knocked him back for a long time. It only took 18 months before he had a queue at his door of people asking him how he was doing it. And he said, you laughed at me. I've shown you how I've done it. So the lack of confidence thing is a really difficult one because it's only hurting one person. And then missing the story arc. So a bit like this presentation, when we go through, hopefully you'll see how it goes from the start. I'm giving you some ideas about what we're going to go through, a bit about me, and we're going to come full circle back around to the end. And I'm going to talk to you about how you can actually take this forward and how you can benefit yourself. You do the same in podcast interviews. You do the same in any type of storytelling, any ad. The story arc is where you link the start to the finish. Every good movie you've ever seen, every good content creator, every good anything really. The idea is, book is what I was thinking of, is they'll bring something back around to the end. So if you're doing an interview, for example, and you're trying to tell a story of the guest through your questions, at the start, you might find that they had to show a lot of resilience in their early years. And at the end or towards the end, where they're talking about their business now, you want to be able to inject, where does the resilience come back in again? Can they make that link in their mind of, oh yeah, I had resilience at the start. I'm showing resilience now. That's a story arc. That's how you can make people really buy into that story and make sure that they're bought in and interested. So let's look at some tactics, because we know that LinkedIn is the #1 place for business owners and investors to build their authority. We say this because it's still so young. There's about 1 billion users, so doesn't seem that young. But an influencer or someone with a big influence on LinkedIn has massive, a maximum of 100,000 followers. There are people with 1 million or 2, but it's very rare. It feels like everyone on Instagram or TikTok these days have hundreds and hundreds of thousands, millions of followers. They haven't got authority. They've got followers. LinkedIn is where you build authority by posting thought leadership. And thought leadership is obviously different to normal content because you're genuinely putting out into the world your opinions and your experience in a storytelling way, hopefully. So how do you become recognized on LinkedIn going into 2025? I'm very aware we haven't got long left in 2024. So let's say that we start now and we look to build it up into the next 6 to 9 months, where you post thought leadership 5 times per week. Thought leadership is something that is worth $50. That's the way that we would always use in a framework. So if you put a post out there, it can still be about something that you've done, or something you've done in the last week, something that you've learned, something that your kids reminded you of, something that your business is struggling with. As long as it's worth $50 to someone, and we think about that as if you paid a mentor, they're not going to give you tactics every single day. They're going to give you advice. You're going to lean on them. It should be worth $50. Really make sure that people understand that your thought leadership is valuable. We want to use a combination of top, middle, and bottom of funnel posts. So that means top of funnel, awareness. So I want to know about you. So if you're brand new to LinkedIn, maybe you've got a following, but you haven't posted for ages, maybe you have no following. We just want to go awareness. By awareness, I mean, who are you? Origin story, current story, what's going on? What are you experiencing? Why is it interesting? Middle of funnel is consideration. So once people have become aware of you, you can start talking about consideration. So you can start being like, I've learned this, and now this is what I'm going to talk to you about. This is what I think we could talk about. We can help. Bullet points. It's really about people who are aware of you, they know you, and they like you, learning from you. But before you get the know, like, and the trust, which is where someone becomes a customer, we need to use the bottom of funnel or the conversion piece. This is where you genuinely say to someone, this is how I can help you. Still in a post, still in content. This could be a newsletter, sign up to a lead magnet, book a call, whatever it is. The point is you're actively asking someone to do something. And so the ratio here would be 1 in 10 posts is a conversion piece. You really want to stay as much as possible towards awareness if you're brand new. If not, I would think about going 2 to 3 a week of awareness, 2 a week of consideration, 2 to 3 a week of consideration, and then 1 conversion every 2 weeks. I hope those numbers made sense there. Basically, every 2 weeks, you do a bottom of funnel 5 times a week, more than enough. If you haven't got Clio, get Clio. Just a bit of a tip. This is a free Chrome extension, which will just tell you what posts are doing well on LinkedIn. If you go on someone else's profile, you can see what posts have done well for them. For LinkedIn, you may as well have this tool if you're trying to build any recognition. And remember to create a killer profile. So your LinkedIn profile is your website. It's your social profile. When anyone sees you engaging with any content, they're going to go onto your profile and they're going to look at your banner, your profile picture. your description, your featured section, and they're looking for it all to be unanimous. Everything looks very similar, all branded up. They're not looking for it, but the search platforms are looking for SEO. They're looking for more about you. People tend to, if you look at a heat map, they tend to go through a LinkedIn profile in a very similar way. So they're looking for more information. They're not ready to buy from you. They want to learn, or they want to give you their email address. They're ready to buy from you. You can have that link in there and have some sort of CTA, whatever it might be. The idea here is that by posting content, you're going to get attention, but by creating a killer profile, you're going to get conversion. And utilizing video. This is an up and coming thing. If you've got LinkedIn on your app, on your phone, you'll see there's a bespoke section for video now. It's really, really big in the US at the moment. You'll get a lot of impressions if you put some good quality video out there. We've noticed the engagement comes down, but if you're looking to get out there, get your face out there, you're happy in front of camera, video is a great way of doing that. And remember to focus on community. So if you look at the LinkedIn page on LinkedIn, their own page, they will talk about engaging with the community, helping one another. And so if you follow anyone else who runs a big company, big social company like Instagram, the CEO of Instagram is a great person to follow on Instagram. He talks about Instagram being a sharing platform. So to do well on Instagram, you've got to have posts that people save and people share with their friends. LinkedIn's slightly different. They want people to foster community. So it's the engagement under the posts. It's the click through to your profiles. They want to support thought leaders. So focusing on community is massive. And there's a bit of a visual for those visual learners amongst us. Top, middle, bottom. We want to get as many people at the top as we can and further them to the bottom as effectively as we can, where we are recognized for exactly what we want to be recognized for. Podcasting. Podcasting is a big one into 2025. This is when we really think we'll start seeing the true power of podcasting. So again, there's roughly 4 million podcasts in the world. To become a top 1%, you need to have 5,000 downloads within 7 days of putting an episode live. Most podcasts, I think 90% don't get past episode 3. More than 95% don't get past episode 20. Podcasts have the highest retention of ad listeners of any media. 95% or more of people don't skip a podcast ad. So the sponsorship opportunity alone, along with the recognition and the networking with other incredible people, is incredible. Analysts put Trump's win down to media exposure from podcasting. Whether you want to believe it or not, he went on 14 podcasts and garnered 124 million views. Harris went on 4 podcasts and garnered 5 million views. So it's one of many metrics, but it's one of the metrics that's enough to push people over the edge towards making a huge, huge decision. So how can you benefit from podcasting? Well, whether you've got your own podcast or not, I've broken it out for you. So if you do have your own podcast, doesn't have to be a super flash podcast, double down on the quality of guests. The biggest and best tip we can give you is to hire some sort of guest booker. Have a guest bank where they're constantly coming to you, they're constantly booked in, whether you use a studio or not. You've got a high quality flow of good guests. Make sure the frequency of episodes is consistent. We've touched on consistency a couple of times. So whether you want to do one every 2 weeks, one a week, one a month, make sure people know and understand how often that's going to happen. I think more than one a week is going to be a massive expense and it's going to be very difficult to run. So one a week is more than enough. Remember to utilize the SEO. So like we said, across all social platforms, and obviously your podcast hopefully is going to go on to whatever your podcast platform is, but also Instagram and LinkedIn and YouTube. SEO works combined across all of those areas. So if you get a guest, when you're doing your research, you can pick out the SEO keywords before you even start. You can use AI to help you with this. And then I've used more better there, the Hormozy phrase, more better research. Do you need to do more research or does it need to be better? So when a guest comes on, what we tend to see is that they are very shocked by the amount of knowledge we have on that person. And the reason we do that is because if we know more, we can direct the conversation better. So if you're a host and you just go with a normal set of questions and you're trying to ask questions, you think you're the hero, right? The audience is the hero. So you need to get as much information from that guest to benefit the audience. And you need to be able to understand where they've come from, what podcasts they've been on recently, and why you should try and go down a different storytelling avenue to get something new out of them. Easier said than done. I've touched on it already there. Story arcing your questions. So you want to make sure that you're bringing the story from the beginning of the podcast to the end. It all links together, so the person who's listening feels really familiar with the situation. Interestingly, comedians are very, very good at this. If you listen to any podcast with comedians or, you know, media personalities, Off Menu podcast, if you haven't listened to it with James Acaster, very good. They do a perfect story arc because they have that framework in their podcast. And then don't be afraid to not release poor episodes. So good example of this. So on our podcast, we've had Olympians, millionaires, billionaires, and we've had to not put some episodes out because the quality was not high enough to release to our audience. And we can then tell the person that, you know, there was not a lot of value out of them. Some of it can be down to the host, the research, of course, but we owe it, and we all owe it to our audiences to make sure we're putting out high quality content, wherever it might be. I'm just niching it here to podcasting. If you don't have your own podcast, or you do, this is for all of us. We need to get on more podcasts. Podcasting is such a good way of creating high quality content efficiently. So to do that, we recommend a media pack. You can get media packs done really cheaply, or you can do them yourself with Canva. Media pack should show why you should be on a podcast. Again, we're talking about why should you be on a podcast in the first place? Do you have a following? Do you have experience? How can someone trust that you are going to talk about something of relevance and either widely accepted or not? It should be heard by the wider audience. Really good way of doing this is get all the podcasts that you've been on in the past, add them to a Spotify playlist, stick that in your media pack. They can click on it and see every podcast you've been on. And again, guest booker, you could just get someone to book you onto podcasts. Secondly, you need to answer questions with epiphanies. I was going to try and get a clip up on here, but I thought it'd be too much of a faff. So one of the best people we've ever seen on our podcast doing this is Daniel Priestley. You've heard of Dan Priestley, runs Dent and KPI and Score App. When you ask someone a question, or when we are asked a question, usually we just want to answer it. We just want to go, this is what I would do, or this is what I think. You want to answer with an aha moment or an epiphany, because the person listening is looking for something subconsciously to share with someone later on. What did I hear in this podcast today? This is what I learned. So for example, I asked Daniel Priestley, what do we need to look at, or what do we need to think about with AI over the next few years in terms of business growth? He took a moment and he said, in the next 3 years, we need to decide whether we are going to consume or create. And it was like a hook on LinkedIn or social media. That was his epiphany. That was the thing in the feedback that everyone said they took away and told their spouse or their business partner or their friend, that line. And he did that with almost every single question. And the best people who go on the most podcasts and they've been PR trained, they do that. They speak in these lines that you can quickly take a nugget away. And it works in so many places. Remember, podcasting is effectively just public speaking, but you're answering questions. Basically a professional Q&A. Don't let the host's research dictate your path. So you can now see how I'm conflicting, because as a host, I want to be in charge. I want my research to dictate the path so I can get new information out there. As a guest, I want to dictate the path because I want to make sure that what I'm talking about is relevant to my current story. It's relevant to what I want to achieve now. And so you can do that by just making sure that you're challenging them. So they bring something up and they really, they might be a podcast about marketing and they really want to talk about one specific part of ads, paid ads, whatever it might be. But you've spoken about it before recently, it's not that interesting. They just want it for their clips and their information, their content. You need to be able to decide how you're going to move that forward. And it's by doing your own research before you go into a podcast about yourself. What have you spoken about recently? What have you learned recently? What books have you read? What value can you add? Bring your unique mechanism as a funnel. So we touched on this earlier. What is the unique mechanism? Always bring it to a podcast. So if someone comes to a podcast and they say halfway through, there's a question about something they do in their business and they say, actually, I've created this incredible free asset, or their book. A book is a great example. We create this incredible free asset as this downloadable framework that really will help all your listeners to do X, Y, and Z. I'm happy to give it to you and put it in your description and they can have it for free. What you've done is you've put your unique mechanism into that description or into that podcast, into that social media post. And you've then directed traffic, not only to your socials, because hopefully you're a good guest, but also to your funnel. So we're monetizing podcasting, not only using it for recognition and for more content in the Flywheel, we're using it to actually drive more traffic. definitely use pattern interrupts. So again, we really don't want to talk in the same way all the time. This is such a hard thing not to do. We tend to all talk in the same way. So you start at one tone and you'll continue the whole way through your presentation, your podcast, whatever it is. I'm probably doing it now. I'm not the best. I'm just trying to relay my information. So by changing the way that you speak, or by changing the answers you give, or by not giving the answer they're expecting, you give a pattern interrupt that someone will remember later on. We want to become recognized. The best person I've ever had on my podcast for this was a lady called Lauren Tickner, very well known in the business and online coaching space. She knew every single thing about my audience. She had done such in-depth research that every single answer that she used was specific to the people that she knew she was talking to. She was able to signal to them, I know you. If you ever want to work with me, you can. I know exactly who you are. I can cater to you. You should probably follow me because I know you and I resonate with you. I've been you. Very clever to go on understanding who you're talking to. Embarrassingly, this is my first ever podcast. So a good friend of mine who is quite a good life coach, he came to my apartment in JVC in Dubai. There's a lapel mic you can see on his white top, and one on mine, $30 that cost us. The camera is just my phone on a tripod, and we did a podcast. Embarrassingly, I just asked a question from a script that I've made, and we started there. And here we are today. So we've done more than £3 billion worth of guests, net worth we've had on 80 plus episodes. So not too many in terms of episodes. We've been a couple of sponsors have been with us for the last year or so. And like I say, we've had some of the best entrepreneurs and athletes in the world. So why are we talking about LinkedIn and podcasting together? We touched on at the start of this presentation, we were talking about why are we going to use storytelling to become recognized. But really what I want to give you is the tactic. And I've given you two. I've given you a combination. I've given you LinkedIn and podcasting. Truly, to become recognized through the power of storytelling, you need a content flywheel. The reason we talk about a flywheel is because we're all busy entrepreneurs. We've all got stuff going on. So we don't want to be constantly thinking about new content to go out there. You know, we're not creatorpreneurs. We're not the ones who want to go and do constant reels. So what we do is we use a content flywheel, and you can use this. I know lots of people who don't have their own podcast and they still use this. So what you want to do is you want to position yourself correctly, and you want to check in on the positioning every 3 months. Again, we went through that slide earlier about positioning, finding what you want to be known for that resonates or relates to what you do. You then go on podcasts and talk about it, or you have your own podcast where you interview people and you relate to what you do. You then take those clips or that information and you put it onto social media, ideally LinkedIn. If you're in the business space, LinkedIn. You then reuse that stuff or that content, video or copy, and you put it into newsletters, emails, ads, anything you want. And you repeat the flywheel. You position yourself. You make sure you're still just 1% off either side, not as much. That's the maximum play you're allowed. Then you go on a podcast, you release a podcast episode, you put it out on LinkedIn, you talk about more thought leadership, you put it in some emails, some newsletters, some nurtures, you put it out to your audience. You're showing constant value. You're constantly reminding them that you're with these high net worth people, or you're with these interesting people, or you've got these thoughts. You're interesting, you're opinionated, you've got value to give. And this means that you only really need to go on to a couple of podcasts a month maximum, or produce your own. And then everything off the back of there can feed your flywheel of content, which if done correctly, will help you become recognized for exactly what you do. Oh, perfect. There we go. I hope that was useful. I'll hand back to you, James.
Awesome.
Or Nick.
Thanks, man. I mean, that was really great. Really, really great. Obviously resonates with a lot of what we do at Robot Mascot as well, which is awesome.
Perfect.
So look, I've shared in the chat a link to my media pack and my link, just to give you guys a bit of an example as to exactly what you were saying, is like a grid of all the podcasts I've been on, so people can see the credibility there and the authority. So if you're thinking of building a bit of a profile, which I highly recommend, because especially if you're raising investment, if an investor can look you up and see you as a thought leader, and you have interesting insights about the market where you're trying to launch a business, and you're thinking about things differently to others in your space, it's going to be so credible. And if you're backing that up with talking and podcasting and thought leadership, it's going to really, really help you out. So if you are thinking of doing it, take a look at that as a bit of a guide on the sorts of things you might want to have in your media pack. It's not perfect by any means, but that's the one I use. So hopefully that'll help kind of expand on what you were saying there, Freddie. The main question we got, I think you just answered with the flywheel, but Fifi has asked, what would you recommend starting with, podcasting or social media, when you're kind of bootstrapped and time strapped as an entrepreneur? So I think you've kind of answered it with kind of, if you do the podcasting stuff, you can kind of reuse it for everything else, and it should be a proper time saver, right?
Exactly. I'd always say if you can get onto the podcasts, then that's a great way to start the flywheel going. But obviously it's the cheapest, easiest, quickest way to do it would be to get LinkedIn going. So just start posting on LinkedIn 1 or 2 times a week, just awareness pieces. And then from there, you'll start to notice people in the ether of business who will invite you on their podcast. Maybe you haven't got a big enough audience to go on the bigger ones, but you can get onto some smaller ones. You can start that flywheel going, and you can start to build up and become more confident in the content you're putting out there. So podcasting is where I would like you to start, but if you need to start with LinkedIn, that's absolutely brilliant as well. They're both great places to start, and they work together from the offset.
Yeah, I mean the way we've done it is whether it was I record a lot of videos, sort of face camera, kind of 3-minute kind of insight videos. So rather than podcasting, I do that. But then we send that over to a freelancer who turns that video, that 3-minute video, into a blog post, and then to another freelancer who turns that into a load of social media posts, a version for my socials, a version for Robot Mascot socials, and then it goes into the newsletter and these events, and we do the same thing with these events, and you have to do 1 hour of an event like this or a talk, and you can get months worth of content in one go, and there's some incredible people on Upwork that can help you do all the heavy lifting. You just have to invest the hour into the podcast, and then work with some great freelancers from Upwork or whatever to turn that into all of this incredible content that positions you as a thought leader. So yeah, that would be my
that was going to be one of my questions, Freddie. How much time would a founder need to set aside to do this work with you?
So we always say, if you're going to do LinkedIn and you're going to do it correctly, no more than half an hour a day. You can get some really, really good feedback from the LinkedIn platform with just half an hour a day, 5 days a week. It might take you another hour to write some posts, depending on how proficient you are. And then obviously, if you're going to go on some podcasts, if you do them online, maybe an hour to do a podcast a month, maybe if you do it in person, a bit longer. But it is the cheapest way in terms of spending time of getting high quality content out there. We can all do, you can all get a freelancer to do your Instagram for you, but in terms of the actual reach you can get up to 5, 10, 15,000 minimum impressions a week on LinkedIn pretty quickly, with some real influence and authority behind you by using this sort of framework.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I think there's a question from Nick Gibbons that's in a similar vein, about the best way to manage the time spent researching and preparing for this. He's just saying it takes so much time out of a busy day. What's the best strategy for managing that time?
The best strategy for the podcast research?
Yeah.
So what I would do is use a custom GPT. Create a custom GPT on ChatGPT, which you've already trained to do the research for you. And you can double check that if you want to. You can have someone do it for you. But the idea is that if you train ChatGPT up with the custom GPT to understand exactly what you're looking for in terms of research, so you're going to want to understand what podcasts they've been on recently, what their social following is, what have they spoken about recently, what does their business do? It can find out the background. And usually if it can't find out enough information, it's a good sign that maybe they're not right for the podcast, depending on who you're going after, of course. If they are not coming back with that much information on using AI, you can look at their socials, look at their website. A good business or a good business owner might have their own personal brand website. If not, on their website, it's going to explain who they are, or on one of their social posts. So again, I would say maybe an hour maximum on podcast research is more than enough. If you just get into your flow state with some binaural beats, that's more than enough time to get loads of information on a person. And then obviously, what we then do in our podcast notes is we set it up with all the main questions down one side, And then depending on what we think they're going to say, we'll have then story arc questions across. So 2 or 3 more. So if I was thinking that someone's going to talk about, maybe ask a question about, how they started their business, like a really basic question. And I know from the research what they're going to say, but I also know they might not want to take that same path because they might have heard it recently on a different podcast. I might have 2 or 3 different questions that I can then arc off there. So it comes down and across. So you can create this nice framework to really make sure that you're leading the questioning as clearly as possible.
That's brilliant. That answers Scott's question about explaining a bit more about the story arc, I think, so we can cross that one off. He also asks, how would you define your position if you're going to position yourself as this sort of thought leader, how do you know where you should focus?
How do you know where you focus? That's a good question. So I would start with like, what do you actually do? And then what does the market want? And then it's always really about testing, right? So you can put something out into the world and maybe just put it in your LinkedIn banner. I help this kind of person do this because. That's all we need to put out there. So I help business owners do X because of Y, or in less time. Think of it like that, a really short sentence, under maybe your LinkedIn bio. Maybe your podcast says a similar thing. And then really what you need to do is then ask the market, right? I think it might be Dan Priestley's famous quote of, we don't want to test in the mind, we test in the market. I think I've butchered that, but it's something like that. James, you probably know better
than me. Sharpen your tools in the market. So
exactly. So I'll get it directionally correct. That's why I said that was the key part. I get directionally correct. You do this to help people do that because, or how, I want to know how ideally. And look at people that have got LinkedIn bios, right? Like James has got a great LinkedIn bio, Nick as well. Go and look at it and see how they've written it, because they've written it in a way, not by chance, because they put some effort and some work into it to help you understand as quickly as possible what they do. And so that is your position. And then from your position, like I said, you can then say, these are the content pillars I talk about. So if I talk about storytelling, and I then talk about my pillars as podcasting and LinkedIn, if I had one that talked about something really bizarre, like food, yeah, maybe it brings you closer to me because it's familiarization, but it doesn't make sense. It's not going to actually help you to come closer to my world and my ecosystem. That's really the key, is putting it out there, testing it, maybe asking your customers and see where you land.
The important thing is to make sure it's not too niche that gives you different. So if I think about Robot Mascot, me and Nick sat down and kind of like, what can we both get excited by? And it was like these great ideas. Nick being a creative director and loving kind of conceptual ideas in advertising and as an artist, and me more, I kind of loved business and those sorts of angles. And that was the thing that we both kind of shared in common, was seeing these great ideas flourish from different perspectives, but it kind of worked. And then that allowed us all to have, as a team, have a unique, we could talk about different things in different ways that all linked to that one positioning of great ideas flourishing. And I could go off down an investment route but we both kind of have a passion for communication. And it allows us to put on events like this because this is all part of that overall positioning. So I think it's about kind of, you have that top level position that allows you to spin off and do other things. And then you can have something sort of 3 or 4 pillars that connect to that you're personally really passionate about, and your co-founder could be passionate about different pillars in that same top level strategy. So it's sometimes it's having these kind of layers of positioning as well that you can use as a business, as an individual, and take you down to a few different, so then you're not saying the same thing all the time. You can talk about a few different things.
And that's kind of why I said, like, you don't fixate, right? Because if you fixate too much on the positioning, and I know I said it was really important, it is really important, but you fixate too much, you won't end up posting anything, or you'll go really, really too narrow. So it's important to get something started, beat perfectionism, and then just use some sort of spreadsheet or some sort of monitor system to make sure you're roughly on the right guidelines. So you're not going too far one way or the other, so you can correct before it goes too far.
I would like to read a question from Andrew. He's asking, how much should you share any mistakes made, lessons learned from mistakes? So how much of those mistakes should you share on podcasts or LinkedIn? Never, ever, or sometimes?
Sometimes. I would say, yeah, definitely share. I mean, a great example. So we had a client who was doing it himself. We weren't running it for him, but he wanted to start posting more on LinkedIn, and he didn't feel like he had the value. He didn't feel like he could talk about anything. So we just said, well, you've got a big business. Just talk about something that came up in your weekly meeting last week, and then talk about a failure you had. And maybe talk about something that's gone wrong. Maybe you fell over walking the dog or something. We don't want to be naff. You know, you see all these LinkedIn posts of people getting engaged on the beach and then they can explain what that means about B2B sales. You know, you don't want to go down that route, but the idea is that we can find that line between giving value and oversharing by using that $50 method, right? Is this worth $50? If you've learned something from failing in your business or in your life, share it because it's of value to people. If it's just something where it's just a story because you want to tell something, probably not worth putting out there.
Yeah.
But moving that into an investment perspective.
Sorry, James, one sec. Just on that, Freddie, I believe you work with Jasper, Business of Impact, who we had on recently. And his part of his story is about failure, isn't it? That you've really dipped into, about he expected the government to do so much more and be on this initiative, and he was massively disappointed. And he speaks about that from the heart, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. So Jasper's got a really interesting one because he didn't feel like he had anything to give other than the passion he had for sustainability. And so yeah, by talking about what actually he's overcome. So there was a story where his geography teacher in his sixth form class really instilled the worry that his hometown of Copenhagen was going to be overrun by water and icebergs. That was a starting origin story. If you even look further back than that, to be honest, there was the story about his father being in an accident of when he was cutting down a tree, and that rallying the family around and him coming through that was his story of resilience and something that he was able to lean on, because resilience is how we're going to stop the planet from being, burnt or flooded, whatever he wants to talk about. So yeah, you're completely right. It's so important to lean into everything that is relevant to your business and your mission.
One of the thinking about that from an investment perspective as well, if you're building this personal brand to come and convince an investor that they want to see resilient founders that can kind of adapt and learn from mistakes, that no one's perfect, and they want to have people that kind of can take a mistake, realize what went wrong, change it, and make it better. So those sorts of stories are really powerful, and some of the best founders we've seen at raising capital and using this type of method will kind of share a weekly or a monthly vlog or something on LinkedIn, kind of saying, here's 3 things we smashed this month. These are things that we're really excited about, but these are 3 things that went terribly wrong and what we did to overcome them. And that it creates so much more engagement from the audience, from investors, to kind of go, okay, here's someone who's dynamic, they're resilient, they can change direction, they can pivot, they can make things happen and turn things into a success. And that's so important to get across, to especially for investors, because they need someone who can battle through and kind of have come out the other side of these kind of war stories, really.
Yeah, I mean, you are around far more investors than I, but the investors that we know here in Dubai, they don't want to go after the people that are just uber confident because they can't see the pitfalls. They're not happy to share the issues and the mistakes they're making. And that can create cracks, and cracks that you don't see until it's a bit too late. So yeah, you're completely right. I think I think there is a line between oversharing and telling the stories, but most of those compelling stories that help businesses get to the top are ones that are hyper relevant to the mission that they're on. It's really cool to see.
So look, we've ran over quite some length, but it's been such a great session that loads of people are stuck around. So it's obviously been engaging. We'll call it there, because I'm sure that 3 of us could carry on talking for hours and everyone would disappear. So we'll end it there. Thanks ever so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Freddie, for putting together such an insightful session for everyone. And yeah, we'll see you all at the next event we've got coming up. I'm not sure if there's one in January. There's definitely one in February. So keep an eye out on your inboxes for the next special guest that's coming your way. Cheers, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.